It is very good to see. Yeah, we're seeing a bullish overall market. I mean, we've had Bitcoin even popping up here over the last day. It's at 71K right now. ETH is at about 3850. Still waiting for its breakout. I mean, even after this ETF announcement and everything, we really haven't seen anything too bullish. Haven't even seen it cross 4K. I don't believe it did. And remember, ETH's high last cycle was right around 4,800. Bitcoin has crossed its all-time high a couple of times this year. ETH, we are still front running its performance. We haven't seen it get to where we want it to get yet. So if you are still here right now, I mean, we've got a window here, and we're going to get into this and everything, but it's June 5th right now. We've got a window. If you just, for whatever reason, stumbled across, are getting interested in cryptocurrency or stumbling across different programs and shows right now and stuff like that, we've got a window, I think, over the next couple of months that the train, I think, is going to be leaving the station to a degree on some assets. I mean, there's always going to be opportunities here and there in crypto, but I mean, I think we are last call for alcohol when it comes to like the best prices you could possibly get on some assets right now. I think that's just where we are headed, even though things have seemed bearish recently. But looking at Bitcoin and ETH, Ewok, if you want to take a look at those, curious what you think of where, not so much Bitcoin really right now, but Ethereum really, because it's maintaining some of the strength that it gained on BTC since the ETF announcement, but still not doing fantastic against it. And we've talked about this ad nauseum. I mean, I think it's also just because Bitcoin has performed so damn well this year so far. We've seen it do so great against expectations, where Ethereum is kind of playing catch up. So we're still, and that ETF isn't trading yet. I mean, we think it's going to be under a month until it's actually live. They have to get things in written well in the ETF fund for investors and doctored up and make it look like it's a safe whatever they do. But I'm curious, where do you think ETH goes from here against BTC? You can look at either asset, whatever you want to. And when do you think we'll see that ETF launch, and what will the difference be when it's actually live? Because that's the big thing we want to see.
Well, obviously, I think it's going to take off once it does go live. You've got so much money coming into it, and the liquidity that's out there is just, there's not a whole lot. Richard said it a couple of weeks ago. Was it last week or something? Maybe the week before. How little Ethereum is out there and how much slippage you would eat if you tried to buy a large bag. I'm looking at right now, the BTC ETH ratio, and currently it's 18.6 Ethereum for one Bitcoin. So, it has gone down. It was up to 23. So it's definitely pulled back in that. So it's slowly catching up. Ethereum, that is slowly catching up to BTC. Ideal range is probably...
Usually they look at the ratio the opposite way, I know, like BTC to ETH.
Well, that's what we're on.
Well, instead of 18 ETH per BTC, well, whatever.
Oh, I see what you're saying. We can do it that way too. I mean, so if we look at that, you're at 0.05.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah. So, and again, it is gaining strength. I was just wondering what the all-time ratio was. And it's all the way back here. It looks like it was 0.15.
There you go. So that's the all-time one. Obviously, ETH is performing better against BTC over time. But yeah, we want to see. I mean, it has crept up a little bit on BTC at the moment, but it's just not quite there yet with what we've seen in the news and stuff like that. So I still think, I mean, even though the chart against Bitcoin has looked horrible, I think that we're going to see Ethereum just absolutely take off. Like you said, I mean, once the actual ETF comes out, and we have seen, contrary, I think a lot of us, our mode of thinking was with the ETFs and stuff was all this big money was going to come in and, it would actually hold the price of Bitcoin down because people would be dumping it and stuff like that. And, some of these entities that hold Bitcoin will be dumping it and things. But so far, we've seen kind of opposite behavior, with the BTC one. I mean, and it even led a guy like Richard Hart to tweet out, not that he was necessarily calling this, but I mean, speculating, mentioning even a 240K BTC, whether that is a little bit too bullish or not. Just the fact that somebody with that good of a head on their shoulders has that potential opinion is pretty bullish, which would mean, I mean, you'd be looking at a $30,000 Ethereum at that point, which we've said before. If we get that, everybody watching this, everybody watching any, you know, crypto YouTube channel here tonight is probably doing really, really well, unless they
Yeah.
chop themselves up like trading over the next
Right.
couple of years.
Right.
So, yeah.
Well, the one thing that we do have to keep in mind, you know, and I don't know, because exchanges exist, because everything, especially with Bitcoin, is not on chain, right? You know, with Ethereum, when you do decentralized finance, everything's on chain. All the buys come through. But with centralized exchanges, you don't get to see that. Like, you don't get to see. And what makes me wonder sometimes is, will these really pump because um, how much of it is fractionalized? You know, I mean, how much of this is like spot purchases that they are kind of holding? You know, like you can buy paper gold, right? It's not real gold.
Right.
So I know there's a lot of that that's done out there. It does get manipulated, and the ETFs kind of just cater to that behavior. Sometimes it's not all spot purchases, and that's, you know, it's one thing that it's supposed to be, but we know how these financial institutions can get sometimes when they're collecting money, and they'll buy it back, and they think maybe hopefully cheaper at some point. You know,
Right.
well, especially once the prices get higher, they'll take paper asset and then try to buy that back as the price goes down on the next cycle. So,
Mm.
you know, it just leads to some of that, and you really have to be careful. But yeah, I mean, it's definitely strengthening. BTC, because of that ETF, did have a head start. I think normally, had that not happened, you wouldn't see much of a ratio change like it did. There was just so much bullish news for it, and it took off rather early. So now ETH has to play catch up, and that's kind of in the situation we're in right now.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that's pretty much it, and I think it's definitely going to catch up. I mean, we got a pretty big window still. I mean, we could have another 18 months really, roughly of this. So we
Yeah.
may have a long way to go. And again, we talked about this timeline. I mean, like everybody was screaming left translated cycle because Bitcoin did so well at the beginning of the year. We've seen it kind of just hang out and pull back a little bit, not pull back anywhere near to where we thought it would. I mean, I think it only dipped into the high 50Ks. You know, in the last few weeks, but I mean, we haven't seen Ethereum pump yet. So I mean, we have got a ways to go, and the longer things take, really, the better, because I mean, it is starting to show us that we might be looking at the traditional cycle here at this
Yep.
point. So yeah, a lot of things to be excited about there. Did you have any final thoughts on that before we move into pulse
No,
chain?
I have not been a fan or thought that we would see one of those left translated cycles yet. So it is playing out pretty much, you know, like I thought it would anyway.
I'm really glad we're not either, because it would have many people would have had to adjust on the fly. It would have caught many people off guard, and I
Yeah.
think really bigger wallets and banks and things like that would have benefited way more from a scenario like that.
Yep.
Whereas retail would have gotten caught way off guard. Well, I
Yep.
mean, retail always gets caught off guard, really, but
Usually.
yeah. But the smarter money, I think, would have not been so smart if we had a left translated cycle. So
Right.